The approach between Russia and North Korea is not a recent phenomenon, but has gained much more intense and worrying contours in recent months. On the one hand, Vladimir Putin, isolated internationally after the beginning of the war in Ukraine, seeks to reinforce alliances that can offer political, military, and even logistical support to maintain their strategic position. On the other hand, Kim Jong-un, leader of one of the world's most closed regimes, sees in Russia an opportunity to break the siege imposed by international sanctions and, at the same time, to design his military power in an increasingly polarized global scenario. But what does this alliance really mean? And why is the whole world paying so much attention to it? Before we analyze the practical impacts of this partnership, it is important to understand the motivations that led to this alignment. Since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, Russia has been the target of several economic sanctions imposed by the United States, the European Union, and its allies. As a result, Moscow began to strengthen ties with countries that traditionally placed themselves on the sidelines of the international order led by the West. North Korea, which has been facing economic and political blocs for decades, has quickly presented itself as a strategic ally. In September 2023, Kim Jong-un visited Russia at a highly symbolic meeting with Vladimir Putin. During the meeting, both leaders reaffirmed unshakable friendship and discussed agreements ranging from military technology exchange to possible trade in strategic resources such as oil, food, and weapons. This meeting was widely released by the international press, but what caught the most attention was Kim Jong-un images visiting Russian military facilities, especially weaponry factories and missile testing places. Putin, in turn, publicly highlighted the role of North Korea as a loyal partner amid what he called Western attempts to undermine Russian sovereignty. This narrative reinforces a worldview in which Moscow and Pyongyang position themselves as counterweight to what they consider a Western domination, headed by the United States and their allies in NATO. In addition, there is an important historical factor to consider. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was one of the main supporters of the North Korean regime, providing weapons, military training, and diplomatic support. The current approach between Russia and North Korea can be seen, therefore, as a kind of return to the roots in a global context that, for many analysts, begins to resemble a division into antagonistic blocs. What differentiates the current scenario is the intensity of the risks involved. North Korea, contrary to what happened a few decades ago, has a significant nuclear arsenal and has been performing increasingly sophisticated tests. Russia, in turn, is involved in Europe's largest armed conflict since World War II, which considerably raises global tensions. Cooperation between Russia and North Korea is not limited to political nods and public statements. It materializes in concrete actions that can significantly alter the balance of global power. One of the most worrying aspects of this alliance is the possibility of transferring military technology between the two countries. North Korea, despite its economic isolation, has developed in recent decades one of the most advanced ballistic missile programs in the world. Its recent tests indicate intercontinental reach capabilities, potentially threatening not only neighboring countries like South and Japan, but also U.S. military bases in the Pacific and even the territory of the United States. On the other hand, Russia has one of the most powerful nuclear arsenals on the planet and dominates electronic war technologies, military aviation, and anti-aircraft defense systems such as the S-400 and the latest S-500, which arouses worldwide interest. The possibility that North Korea access or exchange information about these systems is seen as a direct threat by international security experts. In addition, there are evidence that North Korea is sending ammunition, artillery pieces, and other military supplies to support the Russian forces on the Ukrainian front. Intelligence reports released by Western agencies suggest that weaponry trains have crossed the border between the two countries on several occasions over 2023 and 2024. This type of logistical support is crucial to Russia, which has difficulty maintaining the regular supply of its troops, especially in the face of sanctions that make access to military components manufactured in the West. Another alarming point is the possibility of cooperation in cyber war areas. Both countries have a history of involvement in hacking and digital spy operations. Russia, with groups such as Fancy Bear and Sandworm, and North Korea, with the infamous Lazarus Group, are known for attacks on critical infrastructures, financial systems, and government institutions. The union of efforts between these cyber powers can result in large-scale coordinated actions, further increasing international instability. From a strategic point of view, this alliance represents a new configuration on the global board. While NATO strengthens its positions in Eastern Europe, North Russia-Korea alliance points to an alternative axis of resistance and contestation to the United States-led safety model. The U.S. government itself expressed concern about this approach. In official statements, State Department officials said the United States will not be crossed in the face of any substantial military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang. The same concern was expressed by leaders from Japan and South Korea, who intensified their bilateral and trilateral alliances with Washington. Militarily, the alliance may also have a direct impact on the Ukraine war. With the logistical and potentially technological support of North Korea, Russia can find new ways to overcome the wear and tear of its forces, further prolonging the conflict and increasing the human and economic cost of this war. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un strengthens his inner position by showing the North Korean people who, even isolated, are able to establish alliances with military powers. This internal strengthening is essential for a regime that depends on the perception of strength and self-sufficiency to maintain its political stability. Therefore, the military component of this alliance is vast and multifaceted, involving from the exchange of weapons to possible joint actions in the field of cyber war. The alliance between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un represents much more than a strategic partnership between two countries isolated or pressured by the West. It signals a profound transformation in the global geopolitical balance, directly challenging the international order established after the Cold War and making room for new power poles that can, in the long run, reshape the planet's military, political, and economic alliances. From a political point of view, the approach between Russia and North Korea is a clear reaction to the intensification of Western sanctions and pressures. Both regimes are the target of extensive economic and diplomatic restrictions and find each other not only a commercial partner, but an ideological ally in the defense of a multipolar world. In strengthening relationships, they send a message to the West that, despite the isolation, they can survive, resist, and even expand their influence. For the United States, NATO, and Asian allies like Japan and South Korea, this alliance represents a direct challenge. Increased military and political cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang may force these nations to resize their defense and security strategies in East Europe, focusing on Ukraine and Indo-Pacific, where U.S. military presence has already intensified in response to the North Korean provocations and the rise of China. This new configuration can also influence the behavior of other global actors. China, for example, carefully observes the approach between its neighbors and can indirectly benefit from an environment where West efforts need to be divided between multiple voltage fronts. Similarly, countries that have historically sought to maintain a more neutral position, such as India or members of Southeast Asia, can be forced to review their positions against the emergence of this new axis. In the economic field, although the sanctions imposed on Russia and North Korea limit their formal trade capabilities, there are parallel channels that can be intensified. Russia, with abundant energy resources, can provide oil and gas to North Korea, which suffers from chronic scarcity of these inputs. In return, North Korea can offer cheap labor to Russian projects, as well as continuing to provide ammunition and military equipment to support the Russian offensive in Ukraine. The possibility of making secret agreements, beyond the reach of international inspection mechanisms, increases the fear that weapons of mass destruction, missile technologies, or even elements related to nuclear proliferation can be shared or developed together. This would pose an unacceptable risk to global security, especially in the face of the history of international treaties violations by North Korea. In addition, cooperation in the technological field, especially in areas such as military satellites, anti-aircraft, and cyber war systems, creates an even more unstable environment. The possibility of coordinated actions involving simultaneous cyber attacks or disinformation campaigns can destabilize Western democracies and undermine trust in public and private institutions. For the war in Ukraine, this alliance means a renewed breath to Moscow, which faces logistical difficulties and growing human losses. With the support of North Korea, either by sending ammunition or equipment, Russia can extend the conflict, further wear out the morale and resources of Ukraine and its Western supporters. On the other hand, for North Korea, the benefit is double. In addition to obtaining vital resources and political support, Pyongyang is strengthened on the international board, consolidating his image of military power that, despite isolation, can influence global events. Kim Jong-un stresses his narrative of resistance and strength internally, essential for the maintenance of the dynastic regime he has led since 2011. The world, therefore, assists the emergence of a bloc that openly challenges Western hegemony, creating an environment of greater strategic competition and risks of indirect confrontations. The alliance between Russia and North Korea is not just a circumstantial response to the short-term needs of both countries. It inaugurates a new phase in international relations, marked by alliances of convenience, resistance to external pressures, and willingness to challenge the current global order. The West, in view of this new reality, will have to rethink its containment policies, strengthen its defense systems, and, above all, seek more effective diplomatic mechanisms to prevent the climbing of tensions result in conflicts of even greater proportions. Ultimately, the alliance between Putin and Kim Jong-un symbolizes the deepening of global divisions, with consequences that extend far beyond the war in Ukraine or tensions on the Korean Peninsula, impacting safety, stability, and world economy in a deep and lasting way.